So once again, my microphone is on the fritz, but I'm going to do a quick update here. I've changed a couple of things. Now, one thing over there that we'll get to in a moment. I first of all want to say that most of the track is done. Let me just move this here for a moment. Back that up. We had a really terrible pinch point as actually up here. I've actually rerun the track. I've gotten my soldering down to not a science, I would say, but, novice level at least. I also want to break in here for a moment to mention that you will notice in this one that we're not using the Walther's goo anymore. I've switched over to liquid nails. There's a distinct difference you can see on the cork. Unfortunately, I was not using anything that was clear. Wasn't aware of a clear product that would work. But we are going to cover that up eventually, and I'll discuss that later on in the video. I do want to also briefly apologize. You'll notice that the camera is bouncing a bit, and the settings are off. My 18-month-old apparently got a hold of the phone at some point, and the settings are just awful. So I apologize for the quality of this. We'll correct that for videos going forward. But for now, just enjoy the update. And I've got a very nice curve here. Comes around here. This one still isn't the greatest, but the trains seem to pass it, and it seems to work fine. Probably have just a tiny bit of finessing to do on it, but it seems to work pretty well. Now, I have not glued this because if I look, all this here, you can see that there's a pretty bad dip here, and I haven't figured out what I need to do to fill that in. So I've got to figure out what to do here. So this section isn't quite straight and it is not glued. So I need to take care of that. One thing I will mention, we are no longer using Walther's goo. We are now using liquid nails, as many of you have pointed out. And I will admit, this is a much better solution. The only downside is that residue that it leaves behind. That residue ain't so great. But I've just kind of come to a decision here. I'm going to set this right here. And this is probably going to upset a few people. This was initially just, cork with track. In fact, I initially thought it was Atlas track, but I'm wondering if that's the case. Because here's a piece of the original track, and if you actually look down here, if I look really closely, it's got these metal staples. It's flex track. It's definitely very early flex track. The ties are not wood. They're made of not plastic either. They're made of some kind of fibrous material. But then you have the switches that I took off, and these are definitely far more modern and are labeled as Atlas. So I don't know if those are Atlas and just an older style. I will say these ties are very similar. They are definitely newer, however. So I'm not... That remains a bit of a mystery. But, I've got the track almost completely done now. I have had to redo this section now twice. It is now... Every train can go over this now. Every train I own is... Even the Atheron, which is very finicky, as it turns out. This is a really tight radius, and the Atheron doesn't like it. I've done enough finessing of this. Even the Atheron goes over that, and it does not like it. We have a new locomotive added to the lineup here. Definitely does not fit with any of our theming, but that is a proper Hornby 00 scale Flying Scotsman. A little background on this. When I was very young, my dad had a model railroading book, and they had a Hornby, Flying Scotsman, and Mallard in that book. In fact, that book was almost exclusively English and German trains, and so I just fell in love with the design. I asked for this for Christmas and wound up getting it, so it is now here in the collection. I've also pulled out, as you can see over there, my old Bachmann Spectrums. So I've got, let's grab him here, the Dewitt Clinton, and I have been quite enjoying this little train. I've owned it for a very, very, very long time. In fact, this is a second generation version of it, And I have the original first generation John Bull over there as well, but it's unfortunately stopped running. I need to figure out what's going on with that. I'll probably have to take it apart and fix it. But I've had a lot of fun with these, and between those three, I think I've come up with an idea, and I think we're going to make a museum not unlike the Southeastern Railway Museum that we recently visited. This is a better setup of the triple track that I was talking about before. Initially, it was double, and these two were like squished side by side, and it was squished so tight you couldn't get any locos even remotely by each other here. This needs to be fixed better, and I'll cover that here in a moment. So I added the curve turnout here. Initially, there was a regular Atlas switch here, went over, very boring. Basically what we have down here. But I've added a third track, and now initially I'd put another switch here, but the problem is I can't. The switches line up somewhere up here, and I felt like it was wasted space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my my remnant tracks. I'm going to kind of position them up here, and I picked up these Walthers, and I know that this initially had Atlas on it, but I just love the look of these so much more. So I've got these Walthers bumpers here. I'm going to extend this track back as far as I can and basically run it to probably right about there, maybe even a little further out. Like that. And then this will just be a staging area for something else. I don't know. But we'll have this one run-through track, one general siding, and then this little staging track, which will be really, really, really nice. I know it's not prototypical. That's not the point. Honestly, given what this represents, I think if they had the technology at the time, this is probably what they would have done anyway. Plus, it gives me an opportunity to sideline some of my passengers, some of my passenger trains, while staging a second freight train. I actually have 3 trains up here right now. I've got the Hornby, I've got the Athearn CSX, and I've got the Southern Mehano over there. And I will, we have an interesting video coming out on that. I'm going to do some mods to that because I really want to double head that thing with this guy when I finally get him running properly. Now this, I will say, I said all my locomotives are working. That one's not, but he is just such a massive train. It'll work on the outer track here. This outer track is probably the inner limit, and in fact, as you can see, the radius on this isn't perfect. It comes to the curved turnout, and then it gets really tight right here. I'm going to trim this cork right here, place another layer on the outside, and then I'm going to ballast it. I know people are going to be upset about that, but I'm going to ballast it just because, frankly, it's going to complete the look. And as I said before, this discoloration, which I was talking about, I kind of got sidelined on. This discoloration is just ugly, so I really have no choice now. But I picked up some medium ballast, Woodland Scenics medium ballast. And I'm going to do some testing with that down here, probably on this track first. And it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. So I've got a lot of remnant tracks here that we're going to fart around with. Still have a minor pinch point here, not a crisis. Everything seems to clear this just fine, but if I'm honest, it just looks ugly. So I'm going to trim these back. I have this track almost completely taken up. But the Walthers goo is really, really, really finicky, and it's got a very strong bond. So I've really got I got 2 or 3 tacked spots here. As soon as those are up, then I can desolder this and recreate it. But I'm working on this section right here, which if I go over here, one of my biggest problems here was clearance on my passenger cars. And you'll see it's very close, but it does get quite close right there. But it clears. It clears slightly, but there should be enough space that even some slightly larger cars should still clear. Just barely, but they will clear. And as I said before, I am keeping this configuration just because I really feel like I want the 90-degree diamond coming off of this. Mostly because when I do a tour of the train room, I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. But I'm going to integrate this into the permanent layout and basically build off this side and this side so that I'm not going to damage this in any way. This will totally be salvageable and will remain by itself. But the honest truth is I want to integrate it into the final layout. So being able to have some of my trains come in here and then exit here will be a massive boost to this and will make it just a lot more fun. I thought about adding another exit up here, somewhere right along here, but honestly I didn't want to modify this too much more than it already is. So I kind of went away from that. I even contemplated putting like a double slip right here, but I really went away from that just because I didn't want to mess with the authenticity any more than I thought I really needed to. That said, like I said, I'm going to ballast it, which wasn't a thing, and I'm going to do some modifications to it, but everything's designed to enhance what exists here and what this represents, not to just, bastardize it, for lack of a better word. Now, still have no clue what to do here. So if you have any recommendations, any ideas, you guys were absolutely dead right. Several people mentioned this about the liquid nails. And I will say it's a faster setting. I will say it is a faster setting glue. I'm not a big fan of that. I actually did a little bit up here to try to manipulate that. I'm sure they have something that's a little more clear, but it gives me a good excuse to add a little more realism. So that's some of the updates, guys. I'm gonna show you some of my. I'm gonna try to showcase some of the soldering here in this for people that don't do the soldering. You can't tell it, which is really nice. If I get really close, you could see my feeders here, but because they're soldered on the back side, you can't tell from this side. Now, if you're really looking from over here, you can kind of see them right there, but I'm pretty happy with the way they turned out. I know some people have other things they do with them, but that's just the idea I went with, and they really just adhere to the coupler there, so it's really not that big of a deal. So yeah, that's the latest. I should have a little bit more. I'm going to finish up this curve right here. Unfortunately, one of my switches kind of bit the dust, so I had to buy a new Pico switch. I know I said I was going to do all Atlas, but this Pico switch is a lot smaller. If I can compare to the Atlas here, the switch and apparatus itself, there's a long straight section on the end of the Atlas and even the old Pico. This gets rid of that. This is going to keep the curve a little bit more consistent. And I don't think anybody's going to notice, honestly, the difference. So that's the switch I'm going to use up here, right there, to go on this straight section. So that's currently what I'm working on. So got a little bit of work to do, but a lot of fun. I'll see if we can do a little test ballasting, and I'll show you guys a little bit of my soldering, the techniques that I've kind of picked up through trial and error, and then if you guys have any other suggestions, definitely put them in the comments section. But if you guys are enjoying this, make sure you hit that little thumbs up button and subscribe. We'll be back with more updates here really soon. We're almost done with phase 1, which is just getting the track run and getting the trains running. That's half the battle, because that's really what I want to get done. And I want all these locomotives to be able to run smoothly and cleanly on this without any major hiccups, because cosmetics can come shortly after. But for now, I want a smooth running track and, free of any worries. So, yeah, we'll check that out. Like, comment, share, all the good stuff. Catch you guys soon.